Just so everybody knows. Trying to unmute everybody. Welcome to a special Monday night edition of Force Connect on the streaming Star Wars SSW network. We are live clearly, and we're having a good time. We've been on 4 nights in a row talking about Star Wars Celebration. I'm Pete Fletcher. I'm one of your hosts. I'm with my good friend Chris Ryans and Nick Milkey, and we're also joined by a very special guest, a gentleman from Screen Crush, Mr. Ryan Arey. Ryan, how you doing?
Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about Celebration and to throw out some theories and other stuff about The Mandalorian.
That's awesome. I have to tell you, all 3 of the people on the screen here with you right now, we all check out the Screen Crush. I can say specifically, I wait for the end of the episode and I'm like, come on, Ryan, get your episode up, man. I need to see the Easter eggs. What did I miss?
It's I'm shocked. Like the first Mandalorian video we did was 12 minutes long, and I looked back on it, was like, that was nothing. Now we do 35-40-minute breakdowns the same day. It's crazy.
I don't know how you turn it around so quick, and but we're glad that you do. So maybe before we just get started, Chris, Nick, Ryan, how are we feeling now that Celebration's over? What's do we feel like Star Wars is, we're going to go into it a little bit. We're going to go into some details to the sort of the state of Star Wars, but do we feel like it was a lot, too much, not enough? What was sort of our takeaway on that? I'll start with you, Nick.
I mean, how do you get mad at having more Star Wars? Like, I've grown up, I've had Star Wars literally the entirety of my life. I was born in 1978. Star Wars has always been here. Star Wars is still here, and it's as strong as it's ever been. And what am I supposed to complain about, right? I mean, we're getting new animation, books and comics that I don't read, shows that I watch, movies that I'm excited about. Sorry, Chris, that wasn't a shot at you. It just happens that way. But yeah, I'm excited. If I could say, if there was one downside to the entirety of these last 4 days, and this is very selfish, it's simply the fact that the next one is going to be in Tokyo, because I don't think I'm going to be able to swing that. But other than that, like, it's amazing. Like, we've gotten so much good stuff, and I'm so excited.
Awesome. Chris, how about you? How are you feeling?
Yeah, Pete, I wanted to laugh in your face when you said too much, because as far as I'm concerned, you can never have too much. I'm a glutton. Gimme. So no, I was I was a big fan of everything that came out. Finally got some news on the new comic series starting up this year. So yeah, I think the only downside of the whole weekend was I wasn't there.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Ryan, what about you? How do you feel the deluge of content? What's your initial reaction to it?
I feel the same way about it being in Tokyo. I mean, I live in New York, so I was like, oh, maybe, it was in LA, it was in London, maybe, not Tokyo. And that's also going to make coverage really hard.
14-hour difference.
I am most excited about the movies. It's been a while since we've had like real concrete Star Wars movies, other than this person's attached to this, and this vague thing exists here. We actually have a video coming up tomorrow about this, where I had on a couple guests and we kind of talked about the tease and the history of movies. But now, like, all 3 of these movies that are announced, I'm so jazzed about, especially the James Mangold one, because I want to see Star Wars get beyond that original trilogy timeline and really see what's out there with this premise, like the High Republic books are doing.
Yeah. I did a quick little 60-second attempt at social media, and I feel really confident about these 3 this time around. I feel like the reason, like I said in my little commentary, is that you don't walk Daisy Ridley out on stage unless that's pretty far down the line. You don't go through what we've gone through with that kind of stop-start situation, and you don't risk that again. So what about Ryan? Do you think, how confident are you in all 3 of these movies?
All right. I'm confident they're all going to get made. I think that the reason Lucasfilm was announcing here and there was because they had a plan when they started, and it didn't really work out. I think Solo and The Last Jedi and Rise, that 1, 2, 3 punch really knocked them out. But they had to look like they were doing something. So they had thank God they had the Disney Plus shows, and it was during the pandemic, so we couldn't go to the movies anyways. So we had The Mandalorian to tide us over. And then I feel like they took their time, they came together, and I don't know who they is, by the way, Kathleen Kennedy or whoever else is in their creative committee, Pablo Hidalgo, I don't know who's in charge. Anyways, so I do think they came up with a good plan. In order of like confidence, I think as far as like going to get made, going to be great, James Mangold's movie, I think is going to happen. I think because it's not attached to anything else there, and James Mangold obviously loves Star Wars, he's going to get carte blanche. He's going to go. The Daisy Ridley film, definitely going to happen because, like you said, they walked her out on stage, and I also think Disney doesn't want to squander all the IP they created with these trilogies.
Yep.
The Dave Filoni one, I'm least confident about because I always thought that the Mandalorian stuff was leading into a big film. And you look at this season of The Mandalorian, I'm loving it because I get all these references. But for somebody who didn't watch the Book of Boba Fett or Clone Wars, like it's got to be really confusing. So I'm curious how they're going to distill all these shows into one like Avengers type characters versus Thrawn film. But I mean, he's a great director and a great creator, so I'm excited to see what the film is.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's he's not. They're not going to run into an issue because of creative differences with Filoni because he's there, he's done it, he is the story maker at this moment. But to your point, it is interesting to try to go from a television storytelling model and bring it to film. I mean, the MCU has been trying to bring some of those characters in, and I don't know about you guys. I mean, it's because I watch them all, but I'm not sure how successful that is to go from trying to pull some of these guys from a series into something a little bit bigger on screen.
Well, the question is, were you able to watch Multiverse of Madness and know what the hell was going on if you hadn't seen WandaVision? So
True.
That's kind of, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's to make a Star Wars, I think it always goes back to people go to watch a Star Wars movie and they go in with expectations. They go in to see the big Star Wars event. But not, I say it all the time, 95% of people have never seen an episode of Rebels and haven't seen the Clone Wars stuff. And so how much of that can they keep up with? And then you add television that where a lot of people are watching it, but not everybody. So you got to be careful if you make a major motion picture for the television audience, I suppose. Yeah. Cool. So, hey, Nick, before we get started, we wanted maybe hit some housekeeping and maybe if you'd like to do a toast as we do every night with Force Connect, we can see if we can make that happen.
100%. If anybody is watching, first of all, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you to Ryan for being here to, sharing this conversation with us. We're excited about that. Like Pete said, we all wait for your videos to come out. We look for the Easter eggs. I find myself watching the episode going, can I get one of the Easter eggs to him so I can get a shout out? Like, we're wrapped up in this product that you've created. But to everybody else that's watching at home, thanks for being here tonight. If you're listening to us on the podcast, thank you for being here. If you want to find us, all of the different places we are located are at the SSW Network, the SSWnetwork.com, same on social media. From there, you can find our merch, our t-shirts, our Patreon program. When we record episodes of Around the Galaxy, our interview podcast, you get to be a part of the live audience right then and there when we record. Sometimes you get to be a part of that conversation with your comments, your questions, that kind of stuff. We send out swag a couple times a year. Our patrons are a huge part of, helping us do what we do. So we're super thankful for that. If you're not doing that for as little as $3 a month, you can be a part of that program. And like I said, we've got merch at the SSW Network shop. T-shirts, we've got all different kinds of t-shirts that we have made. As we say, anytime we have a bad idea, we put it on a t-shirt. Faking in Space, Old Smoothies, the Shill shirt, Generation X-Wing. One of our favorites right now is the I Love Jizz shirt, which is everybody's favorite Star Wars music. And of course, down on the bottom right, we have our Darth Vader / God Save the Queen, celebration design that Pete came up with. So lots of the shirts, mugs, stickers, all that stuff are also available in the merch store. So find all of that by going to the SSWnetwork.com. You can find us, you can find our social media, all the other things we do, including we've been in talks for a little bit, just recently coming up, but we're about to hit full speed on Podathon for this year, and Podathon's going to be coming up in the fall. We're going to raise more money for Make-A-Wish. Last year, we raised $17,000 for Make-A-Wish, and we want to top that this year. So the plans are getting in place. The chips are going to fall in line, and you're going to hear a lot more about that soon. So check it all out. Also, the other thing that we do whenever we have a show, we raise a toast. It's kind of my go-to thing, to raise a glass, to raise a toast. So tonight, I'm just going to raise a toast to Star Wars. We have had 4 days of celebration, even though we weren't able to be there. We were all there together in Anaheim last year. It was that great, nerd family reunion that we love, especially those of us in the podcasting space, getting the chance to get together. But honestly, and I said this the other night, thanks to the production, thanks to the live stream, thanks to, seeing so many of our friends on the live stage, all the people that made it happen so that we could even watch and enjoy it from home, you could still feel the joy that Star Wars is. And despite the nonsense that takes place on social media and online, what we really get to see and realize is Star Wars is fun. And that's the whole point. So I'm going to raise our toast tonight as we wrap up Celebration simply to Star Wars and the thing that brings us all together. So cheers and happy Star Wars.
Cheers, happy Star Wars.
Nick, I'm not drinking tonight, man.
I feel underpoured. Yeah, I made myself a tea. Now I'm like, it's all downstairs.
That's quite all right. Well, it's a Monday. I mean, that's right. I don't know.
It's early in the week.
Not in my heart, though.
Always Friday.
Monday. My only school night's Tuesday night. That's when I'm like, well, it's 9 p.m. I have to get to bed so I can watch The Mandalorian in the middle of the night.
That's right. Exactly.
That's right. Gotta be ready.
Well, we're going to take a real short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Star Wars Celebration and sort of the state of Star Wars as we come out of London this past weekend. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Force Connect, the SSW Network live Star Wars conversation. Tonight, we are joined by not just Nick and Chris and myself, but we have Ryan Arey with us from Screen Crush, and we're trying to recap Star Wars Celebration. We started talking a little bit about, was it too much, was it not enough, and of course, it's never enough. But the Star Wars is now in a different spot. Ryan, you referenced that you're excited to see films coming back for Star Wars. I'd like us to kind of have a quick conversation about what is the current state of Star Wars. And what I mean by that is, I think that's been kind of stops and starts. There's been a lot of, I don't want to say negativity, but a bit of sort of, hey, why are they announcing stuff and it's not happening? Yeah, I know, Chris, there's never negativity in the Star Wars space.
No.
But what are some of the gaps? What's some of the places that is a very strong point right now for Star Wars? And kind of what is the we referenced it a moment ago about sort of going headlong into a film from the television space. So maybe Ryan, I'll start with you. What do you think, if you were to sort of align, what is the state of Star Wars right now? If you were to sort of give the State of the Union on our favorite saga.
Gee, is that all?
That's it. Yeah, is that all? Simple questions, Ryan.
More so, I think the first time since I'm going to say the first time since 2015, because I wasn't that jazzed about Force Awakens. I think I was in the minority of people who walked out disappointed. But I'd say it's optimistic, the most optimistic it's been for a long time. And I think part of the reason for that is now we're in a period where the characters that we all have a childhood attachment to, if you're, like my generation, the people who grew up with the OT, those characters are no longer being featured as much. We have a digital Luke kind of popping in here and there. He'll probably be in the Dave Filoni movie a lot, because I've heard that Dave Filoni's the only person who's allowed to do Luke stuff. But since our personal attachment to these characters it's made it really hard for fans to fully embrace what the movies were doing, because we all had we played with the action figures. We had it worked out in our heads. We know exactly what the right story was and how it should happen. We had the expanded universe novels. Now we're entering an age of no expectations where, does anybody really go into the Bad Batch season 3 with like, oh, I really hope they do this? No, we're just along for the ride. The Acolyte, we're along for the ride. Andor, we're along for the ride. And the 3 movies that were announced, I mean, sky's the limit with these premises. Rey setting up a new Jedi Order. Is there a government in the galaxy right now? Is it all overrun by pirates and gangsters? Are different planets and factions at war? They can do anything. They can do anything they want. And it's the first time it's been that way in Star Wars, with no expectations. And even Episode 7 had expectations behind it. I'm incredibly optimistic about the future.
I love that perspective, and I think I think I've said it before on the show. Mike Chen, the author, was on my show years ago, and he said the biggest challenge that hit Star Wars episodes 7, 8, and 9 was that they were 7, 8, and 9, so they carried with them the baggage of all of Star Wars, and if they were the continuing adventures of Star Wars or whatever, it would have had a different mindset. Chris, where are you coming in on sort of where things are now? Because, and so in addition to the fact that we're all big show fans, comics are playing a different role, and they're starting to come into the content that we're seeing a little bit here and there.
Yeah, and I think it's going to happen a lot more. Like, of course, they're easing everything in with, of course, bringing a lot more of the characters from animation. But I'm waiting for the day when they really start to open the floodgates, and we see a lot of these amazing characters that have been in the Star Wars comics. I do think that we're going to get something with the next season of Bad Batch. Nick and Pete, you guys know what I'm talking about. Scar Squadron, I do believe that they are, that's going to be the ultimate fate of the Bad Batch, or at least a copy of the Bad Batch. So I'm very excited for what's going to go down with that. One thing that I'm excited for, and I'm glad they didn't like set any trilogies. Just set your single movies and then have sequels for those movies if need be. Hopefully we're done with episodes. And I don't mean to sound like I'm hating on anything. That's not the case, but trilogies, all that stuff, that was that, the Lucas era, that could be its thing. And now it could just be like, if we're going to do the thing with Rey in the in the post Rise of Skywalker era, that could be a one-off, or that could be the start of just sequels of movies coming out without having to be confined to a trilogy or anything like that. I think there are two things where for me I could be negative, and that would be with the Dawn of the Jedi. I read some of that stuff, when it was with Dark Horse. But I wonder, like, how I know they're going back 25,000 years in the past, and I wonder if it's going to be too different for Star Wars fans to get into, depending on what the technology is like and things of that nature. Because there's not going to be a whole bunch of planet, hopping on those, because in the High Republic they're still mapping out the galaxy. So I think that would be that. That's one. The other one would be, and I'm so excited for this series to come out, but Star Wars Visions. I'm loving everything I'm seeing, but I think the one thing that was my issue with the last series was way too many lightsabers. And I think it's the same thing, where it's going to be like, there's more to Star Wars, galaxy than Jedi and Sith. So I was hoping to see maybe some kind of adventuring, some smugglers, maybe some Mandalorian stuff, something. But we'll see. But everything else, especially with the comics, and that's the one great thing about the Dawn of the Jedi, that the Old Republic, High Republic, and everything in between that and to Rise of Skywalker. As a comics person, there's so much areas that there's so much room for like amazing comic book stories.
Mm.
And I oh man, I can't wait to see where this goes.
Yeah. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Well, and you've kind of all hit on a variety of the thoughts I have. I think that you're exactly right with, we've heard lots of people say, even before Daisy was announced at Celebration, when is episode 10 coming out? We don't need episode 10. We just need the next Star Wars movie. Let's not put that expectation on it. Let's not, I kind of agree with you with that. Let's not, yes, to this point, Star Wars has had this really special legacy symmetry of trilogies, the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, the sequel trilogy. That's cool. We don't have to make everything we do. We don't have to have 15. This isn't Fast and the Furious. We don't have to go, all the way, all the deep. Let's make good movies and let's give sequels to the ones that warrant it. There are some things that have been left on the table. There's a lot of people that have called for, wanting a sequel to the Solo movie. There was plenty of story bits left on the table for that. There was an opportunity for something like that could have happened, as much as I say that, when I say, let's not necessarily put our money on trilogies, I still want to see more Rian Johnson Star Wars. And if they gave that man 3 of them, I'd be in for all 3 of them because I love The Last Jedi. But let's give him another one and see where it goes from there, because we know that creativity is, a fickle thing. And it may be that he does really good on the next one and decides he's done. So let's not make him mail in 2 more after that in order to get it done. Like, I'm excited for Star Wars movies to move into that territory of let's make one and let's let it be really good and then see what, is necessitated after that. Like, seems like a pretty good, straightforward place to be.
Yeah.
That said, I think, with the 3 that go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think it was the pressure of the trilogy is what got us the Rise of Skywalker. And I know some people love it, but I don't think anybody would be willing to say it was the best of the stuff. Well, there are people who love it, but anyway, but I mean, ultimately, I think that's what led to that kind of a thing. So the pressure of a trilogy, I love that concept of not having to worry about that.
Absolutely. And then I think the other 2 things are, go ahead, Ryan.
No, I would cut you off.
Well, I was just going to say the other 2 thoughts I had really quickly were, with Dawn of the Jedi, I think Pete or Chris, you're onto something exactly too, which is if we're going 25,000 years back, this is literally when it's being figured out. There may not be lightsabers at all. Like, it may be people fighting with sticks and using the Force to figure out how to chop trees down. Let's not get hung up on, exactly what it tends to be. If it's not laser swords and pew-pews, then people get mad. People are going to get mad. We know it's going to happen. And then with the Filoni movie, of course, I'm super hopeful for that because I do love, this era of, the post Return of the Jedi era we're in as an heir to the Empire kid. Like, when she said the thing in the trailer, I lost my mind. When we're getting Thrawn, when we're getting, whatever this is going to be, I have a lot of hope that that's going to be good. In the same way, I hope that Filoni is able to navigate that in a way that is driven from a place of passion, because I think that's where his stuff hits the best. When it's Ahsoka, when it's, working with Favreau to, do especially the first couple of seasons of Mando. I love this season too, because I see they're setting up these bigger pieces. So I hope that he's able to continue to do it with the vision he has, not the pressure of it's got to meet certain critical standards or the fan, that other half of the fandom interaction that puts pressure on to make something that isn't, true to its vision, I guess.
Fair, totally fair. Ryan,
the number one thing I want to see out of the movies is I want a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away and Star Wars, and I want an opening crawl. I watched Revenge of the Sith last night, and I was like, it's been so long since I've just been consuming so much Star Wars TV and the spinoff movies. Can you imagine the roar, whether it's episode 10 or whatever you call it, the roar in the theater when that comes up again, after it being absent since 2019? Like, I'm
ready for the I'm ready for the Return of the Jedi 40th screenings for exactly those reasons.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, for sure. And it's I might have even asked you this, Ryan, when you were on last time, but I think it's more than relevant now because of the fact that we're getting 3 movies, one as far back as you can go, and one in the farthest future we've ever had in Star Wars, and one in a timeline that we all are being marketed to right now, right? Not to make it ugly, but that's the reality. This is the timeline that we're all buying right now, Disney Plus. That said, what does it need to have to be Star Wars? Let's talk about the Mangold movie, because of the fact that is probably the most risky of the 3. I would
Well,
say.
and I read something the other day that said, the Dawn of the Jedi movie is the only movie, including the 2 new ones that were announced, that doesn't fall within like the same 70-year time frame. If you go from, episode 1 to episode 9 and the 15 years that it's going to come after that, like everything falls in the same 70 years. So to go back 25,000 years, like, that's way outside of, that's wild space, as it were, like that gets way outside of anything that's familiar.
Yep.
Which is why I'm
Ryan,
excited about it. Early Force users, no lightsabers, working it out. The first Jedi to fall. You're looking at the Adam and Eve story of the Jedi Order.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited. There's so much you can do with it.
Yeah. Well, and I was sold when they referenced, Ben-Hur and the 10 Commandments, because as I said, those were cornerstone movies of my childhood. Seeing Charlton Heston, seeing, this old school classic filmmaking. And I know we said it over the course of the weekend and other people have said it too, but for Mangold to be given this project, it also feels like it bodes so well that he knocked Indiana Jones so far out of the park that Disney was like, let's keep that good feeling going.
He did. I know I've heard nothing but good things.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I'm so
that's
excited.
That's all I'll say. But that's I haven't
Awesome.
seen it, but I've heard really good things. Yeah.
Amazing.
That's great. That's really good. So I know it's one of those things.
Excited. It's so funny to talk about this stuff like in a really scholarly way, but it's like, oh, laser swords and Ben-Hur and the 10 Commandments, and that's the stuff George Lucas liked, and
exactly.
It's just so much fun. It's just fun, man.
But I
like,
think
it's
there's
just so
but I think there's a point there.
Cool.
Like we all grew up with that, and that is a difference in what my kids are going to be excited about for an upcoming Star Wars movie. I put on I showed them the Ahsoka trailer when it came out because they love Rebels, and like they've watched some of Mando with me, they've seen some of the movies, but like the Ahsoka trailer, even for one of my twins who isn't into Star Wars, she was like, "Ooh, I'll watch that." Like it has a different draw, it has a different appeal.
Cool.
And for the 4 of us on this screen who are of that generation, like we grew up with the 10 Commandments, we grew up with George Lucas and these other Star Wars things. So to hear that's a part of the DNA of, these other things that are coming, we can't help but be excited and drawn to that.
For sure. Yep, absolutely. So, Ryan, we talked a little bit there about the Ahsoka trailer. We talked a little bit about going back, and again, the Filoni thing's going to that it's creating this Filoni verse, the Mando verse. How close do we think this is going to be to the Heir to the Empire stories? How much? I mean, I just saw a clip today. He was saying that they were drawing from EU. Let me ask you, how close do you think it's going to be, and how close do you want it to be? I'm assuming, as a nerd like us, you probably read those books, or at least we're familiar with the comics and the stories. How much do you think is going to follow that? And does that? I mean, obviously, I think it's going to also create a bit of a challenge because people are going to start to expect certain things, right? It's like when you see a Marvel movie from a comic book from 20 years ago, you're like, oh, it goes here. And then it doesn't, and you're like,
So, what do you mean the scrolls are silly? That kind of thing.
Right.
Marvel. Yeah, it's funny you should ask that question because I just recorded a video. I didn't write it. Another one of our great writer editors wrote it, but it was about how they're setting that up. Like Balin seems like, and I will mispronounce the name, a Joris Kaboth type character. Looks like a dark Jedi, and to answer your question, they already did it. Like if you look at what the sequel trilogy was, they've already done that. Yeah. They've already had Clone Palpatine and Tantus, and they've kind of just still the evil son of Jason Solo is basically Ben Solo. Like
correct.
They kind of have already done that, and I'm not super jazzed about it. When Thrawn came back in Rebels, I think we were all super excited to hear his voice, to hear that Kevin Kiner gave him that Philip Glass kind of score, which was just epic. But I hope that it's not too close, because then we'll know what's coming. The whole point of Star Wars is you're taking things that feel familiar but giving us something new. And if I wanted, I'd read the books again. Such good books though.
No. Well, and that's the complaint that even we've gotten, through this season of Mandalorian, which has been, a hot button for certain people. You have people saying, oh, well, that's not what I thought it was going to be. Well, if it was what you thought it was going to be, why would you bother watching it? Like, if you predicted it and you knew what it was going to be, where's the fun in that? Like, I love that the last several Star Wars shows we've gotten 80% of the trailer in the first 2 episodes. Like, that leaves 6 more episodes where I have no idea what the hell's coming. And that's where the fun is ultimately. Like, of course I'm keeping a mental tally. Ooh, we saw the shipyard. Ooh, we saw the, this thing. But once we get outside that, boundary, that's exciting, because as a kid, it wasn't like, ooh, hey, I can't wait for the next thing in Empire Strikes Back. I didn't know what it was going to be. It was the next thing, and it was a surprise. So it's not fun if we know what's coming. Like, I don't know. It's a dumb thing for people to argue about, but here we are doing it anyhow.
Well, and I think expectations continue to be the biggest challenge for a franchise that's 45 years old, because people, that's why I walked out of, when I first walked out of Rise of Sky, The Last Jedi, I said it was both the best and worst Star Wars movie I'd ever seen, because I had it written in my head. I knew what was going to happen, but I was wrong 100% on just about everything. And that was part of the problem. And I think that might be one of the things with Mando this year. Everybody has been with Mando now for 2 seasons, and we think we know where the story is going, and it's happening quickly, and it's going in a different direction.
Yeah.
Are you guys referring to, we thought we know where it was going, like, oh, Din Djarin's going to lead the people or something? Or are you saying that, like, the conflict about the Darksaber kind of fizzled out?
Well, I for me, and maybe that's a great point, because it's probably a little different for everybody, right? I think we thought the journey to the living waters and the redemption, for me, I thought was not going to happen in the first 2 episodes. I thought that was going to be a bigger journey, a bigger story. I think we saw, and maybe this is something that Star Wars is doing extremely well, and we're just not giving them credit for. I think we all thought that Bo and Din were going to go head to head, and now they're sort of partnering through things. And so I guess to answer your question, I think it's around what we thought the story was going to do in one way or another.
Well, my problem there, I didn't have like, oh, I really want to see Din and Bo fight or anything like that. My issue with it was, well, they set it up. They set up a lot of things at the end of season 2. They set up this conflict about the Darksaber. They set up Din and Grogu being apart, and then they ended up not doing that for the season. But the problem is, it's one of those things where, like with Rise of Skywalker, Rey, you're a Palpatine, and it's like the movie was such a reversal of Last Jedi. It took you out of the experience. You don't feel like you're in a galaxy far, far away. Like, we know they're movies, but they're not movies. So anytime you can see the puppet master strings, it always takes me out of it, at least. And that's kind of what that sort of thing does. Like, it makes me wonder, wait, so are you having to get from A to F, so you skipped all the other letters because you have to set up this other thing and this other thing, this other thing? I'd be really curious to hear, like, what is it behind the scenes they thought they were going to do at the end of season 2, and then how that changed through the writing and development of Book of Boba Fett and everything.
That's a great point, and that's a really good question, because I think, the problem is it feels that way, right? And I think that's where, if I was to have an issue with this season, is it does sort of feel. I've been a defender of Grogu returning to Din in Book of Boba Fett, and I'm saying it's one big story and all this other, but it's not marketed that way, and the expectation is that. Well, the season left off here. We saw the Book of Boba Fett end credit scene. We got excited for Boba Fett, and then there's a lot of people who aren't Boba Fett fans who have fallen in love with Star Wars because of Baby Yoda, and so to make that expectation that you have to watch it all, they're in an interesting position there, because I think they think most Star Wars fans are like the 4 of us. But they're not. They'll watch what they want. Some people loved Andor. My son, 10 years old, obviously Andor is not a 10-year-old story. It's not driven that way. But I said, Jack, do you want to go back and watch Andor? And he's like, no. I was like, why not? He said, I couldn't. It's boring. And that's okay. But they're building 15 years. But they're building this whole universe now, and you have to follow it all, and that's a challenge.
Well, and you're exactly right about that. And it comes back to the same thing that we talk about pretty regularly, which is, one of my weather vanes that I tested against sometimes is my dad, who's almost 70 years old, who introduced me to Star Wars And he calls me every Wednesday after he watches a new episode, and he wants to talk about, so tell me who this was. Tell me who that person was. Give me, the download, explain this part to me. And then once I do, he just goes, okay, cool. Like, he's not hung up on it. Like I'm hung up on it going, but wait, why did they do that thing? He just needs a little clarification. But at the same time, it is, like Pete said, it's a marketing thing, because when Mando season 2 ended and we got that post-credit sting, it essentially said the Mandalorian story is going to continue in the Book of Boba Fett. So like, we were told that, but only if you stayed to watch till the end of the credits. My dad didn't do that. He was like, wait, are we getting a Boba Fett show? Like, it's almost like you didn't quite fully get the instructions, because we left the instructions on the inside, printed on the inside of the box, not on a paper you pulled out. So you had to go looking for them. Right. And, that has fed into some little bits of, again, and this is an excellent point. Normies want clarification, not explanation. My dad just wants to know, who was that guy? And then as soon as I say it, he's like, oh, okay, cool. Perfect example. When Ahsoka showed up in season 2, that Jedi with the 2 lightsabers, she was pretty cool. I'm like, what the heck? Like, you don't have any idea how cool she is. But that was all he needed. And now he's going, she's getting a show. Awesome. I'll watch that. Like, it's a weird in between us and him, and that in between of everybody else going, why does it have to be this way? And other people going, okay, cool. Just tell me what it is and I'll watch it.
So then,
it's very strange.
So then from there, back to the state of Star Wars. What is the state of Star Wars as it relates to the common fan? Because again, they got us, but the common fan. Do you, Ryan? Do you think that they're in any sort of? Do you think do they have to address this, or is it not that big a deal? Or are we reading into it because again, we're that Uber fan, so we're digging into that next level? But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I got a network of people I ask. Like Screen Crush's editor-in-chief of the website, Matt Stenger, is a movie critic and not a slouch when it comes to nerd culture. Right. I mean, he wrote a book on Spider-Man. He has seen Star Wars many, many, many times, hasn't seen the shows, always confused. So if Matt is getting confused by this, and Matt, if you're listening, I absolutely love you to pieces. If Matt's getting confused, like he always says he is on our podcast, then they're not doing due diligence and catching people up. If you're gonna like put on your thinking cap, if you go, okay, so when the Ahsoka show starts, if they want to catch people up on who Ahsoka is, I think you could open the show with like a flashback where she's meditating and she sees herself meditating with Anakin when she's young, and that way we immediately know, oh, she was Anakin's Padawan. There's a similar scene in an early in a Dark Horse Star Wars comic. Chris, you probably know this one. It was in what was the name of the book? It was a great series. It was Vader right after Return of the Jedi, or right after New Hope, and he's meditating, and he remembers being with Obi-Wan Kenobi, like just prior to Attack of the Clones, and it was a beautiful symmetry of Vader meditating, going to Anakin meditating, and it was one of the first times they ever connected the OT with the prequels in such a direct way in the comics. Right. And I would love to see that kind of just a very gentle nudge to help the audience out a little bit for what's important to know. The Obi-Wan show did that. We had they did that, and that was in that episode.
Yeah, and that was the point that I was just going to make as you were saying that is Obi-Wan. They did that, but it was really interesting that we got season 3 of Mando, and they didn't do a previously on to include the 2 episodes of Book of Boba Fett where Din and Din and Grogu got back together. So my dad did happen to watch Book of Boba Fett, but I know other fans like him didn't, and they're like, wait, how are they back together? That was the big outcry the first 2 weeks, is how are they back together already? And so again, sometimes it's the little nuts and bolts technical aspects of just telling, give a little bit more to the audience at large. I'm not going to be mad that I have to watch a recap of, whatever they've got going on, because I go, oh yeah, I remember that moment. Oh yeah, that's cool. I like how they did that. But for those other people that they're drawing in or connecting with, it just helps make that a little bit more of a smooth transition. But I also think your point is right, Pete. Is it as big of a deal? There's the star of the show right there.
Sorry, he's barking at me. I didn't want to undermine what you were saying.
That's all right.
He'll get back down.
No, that's good.
This is our manager. Our little
that's
guy.
Right. That's right. That's awesome. But yeah, it makes a good point in how much of that is needed. I've got friends closer to my age, not my dad's age, that are what we would call normie Star Wars fans, and they're watching, Mando and that kind of thing. I went to the lake with one of them the other weekend to go fishing. And as we were driving up there, he was asking me questions. And I was pointing out that Ahmed Best was the person that rescued Grogu. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Like, he didn't spend weeks being hung up on it and being blown away or being angry that they didn't pick somebody else. He was just like, oh, that's neat. But it didn't affect his experience one way or the other that he didn't know who that random Jedi was, or, just bringing in those little things. So it's a very interesting place, I think, for content to be on this scale, because when you look at how many subscribers Disney Plus has, you look at, this isn't a juggernaut that's going away. We've clearly seen that over the last 4 days. Like, there's more to come. It's just interesting how you navigate something so big with such a wide range of fans at different levels. I guess that's really what we're talking about.
If I could pose a question to everyone, as far as like the normies versus like, fans like us, what would it, how can I phrase this? I'll say what I don't want to have happen. And I don't mean to sound gatekeeper. That is 100% not me. But when I say this, does anyone want them to think that to help with the normies to get more into Star Wars or to understand what's going on? What I don't want them to do is kind of marvel it up a little bit and kind of water down, the essence of, or water down the storytelling, or water down like what the characters are like, just to kind of like bring the normies in, because Marvel does a fantastic job at that, and it's worked for them. Like the Captain America stuff, the Winter Soldier stuff, that's like my favorite aspect of the Marvel universe. And people are like, oh, what do you think of that third Cap movie? I'm like, oh, I've read Civil War. I've read it. I've read every tie-in, all that stuff, and I know the tie-ins. I can't really bring that in as far as the movies go and whatnot. But to me, that Civil War movie was more just a dispute at an airport than a world-spanning event that had like so many consequences. Like not just for a few people, but like the world. Right. But I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Like, what does it mean to bring the normies in?
Let me throw it to Ryan with a corollary question that goes with that, which is the other side of that: is Star Wars at risk for getting too enamored with itself? Like, can Filoni get too stuck in that universe? So, Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Like I mentioned earlier, I do think Filoni, I wouldn't say he's enamored with himself. I just think he's really into the story that he's telling, and that's great. Like, to get that amount of passion, and you rarely get to see creatives like with that much leeway. So I think that's great. I do think that, you got to remember that, like in Screen Crush videos, if you guys probably get bored sometimes because you're like, I know this. How many times can you explain Ahsoka Tano was Anakin's Padawan? But I learned over the years, people need it, man. Like, you never know.
We're not the target audience
watching your
that,
video.
Honestly.
Right.
You can skip, like I'll put, like I do on our Ahsoka Tano trailer video, we did the Ahsoka history part first. Like, we had that a few days in advance. So I put a time code in the description in the chapter so you could skip it, And it's so easy to help people along in storytelling, especially when you're dealing with television shows. The Marvel movies, how anybody could watch Avengers Endgame and really get it without seeing anything else, I don't think you can. It's still a miracle that they pulled off the Infinity Saga like they did. I just think you need a little tiny nudge. And the problem with Mandalorian has been, I don't think those were placed in the right way. So, for instance, he meets Bo-Katan in season 2. It's this little thing. You're not Mandalorian. We kind of learned, oh, there's Mandalorians who take their helmets off. I didn't know that. I've only ever seen Boba Fett. They may not be your casual fan would think that. And then we go from that to the Book of Boba Fett, and he's got this Darksaber, and the armor tells him, oh, Bo-Katan tried to rule Mandalore. And Rebels fans are like, yeah, we saw that, the Darksaber, that was awesome. But everybody else is like, oh, okay, from the other show, I sort of get that, right? And then in this episode, we're like, wait, wasn't she going to go conquer a thing, and she really wanted the saber, but now she's like mocking him for having it? There's just too much inferral that's not tied to emotion, because people will understand emotion. Most recent episode, they did something really smart. when they show up at the Mandalorian camp and Axe Woves looks at Din Djarin and says, well, you're a religious zealot and I don't recognize your right to have the Darksaber. Perfect. That was exactly what we needed, because we may not understand Mandalorian houses and clans and factions. We understand bigotry. We understand religious persecution. So at that moment, emotionally, you relate their experience of his covert to an experience you may have had, or at least a historical experience about the people that they're emulating, which is the plight of the Jewish people throughout the centuries. So that way they connected perfectly on an emotional level, and we got it. And I don't think with Bo-Katan we've quite gotten that in The Mandalorian. We got it in Rebels in episodes 401 and 402. I think they did a good job of summing her up for people who didn't see the Clone Wars, but not so much in this show.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly the challenge. And I think it's funny. I felt like the first 2 seasons when they introduced Ahsoka and when they introduced Bo-Katan, they did a nice job of, as you were just saying, to make it like, oh, okay, if I don't know this story, I know who they are. Like, you immediately get that. And I do feel like there's probably a need to go ahead and I don't know. Is it that the episodes are too short? Are they trying to push too quickly through the season? I don't know. And it's funny. I'm saying all this, and at the same time, I'm loving every single second of it, because I already know. Like, I know the gaps. You don't have to explain Bo-Katan to me, so I'm totally down with it. But I worry about it because I know that, for whatever reason, like I have any sort of investment in it, but I worry that the story is moving faster than it was before, and it's not keeping everybody up to date. I don't care about the people saying, oh, it's the Mandalorian and we don't even see Din Djarin that much. Well, it's the Mandalorians. It's it's the story of Mandalore. It's this bigger, cooler story.
Yeah.
Right.
The better story is that any of them could be the Mandalorian.
Right. But at the same time, I feel like they need to, I would like to see them give us a little bit more of that backstory. And because I think here's the thing to remember. And it's funny you said what you did, Ryan, about your Ahsoka video, because I ended up sharing that both on Twitter and to some friends individually, because they weren't sure. They didn't know the Ahsoka story. And that was a great way to do it. And as you said, like, you might pass by it if you already know it. But if you're a Star Wars fan, you want to see that again. Like, show me the flashbacks of Ahsoka. Show me, give me that information. I want to see all that. So,
or a refresher. It may not have been, you may not have seen Rebels recently or whatever. Sorry.
No, that absolutely. I was just going to throw this out there and say, maybe the thing that I posit is they don't really have to adjust their focus on how they're doing, what they're doing, because the reality is we have TV shows, we have animated shows, we have shorts and things for younger kids, preschool, Young Jedi Adventures, all these other things are coming out. We have movies coming back. The options in the menu that are on the table are so vast and so great that when you look at it from a number standpoint, worldwide, Disney has like 165 million Disney Plus subscribers. They're not all Star Wars fans. Like, Celebration was the center of the Star Wars world for the last 4 days, and there were probably 80 or 100,000 people that came through there. I don't know what the number is, but if you factor that up to 1 million, 2 million, 10 million, that's still not even, a huge percentage of the people that are subscribing to Disney Plus and Disney and being so invested in it. So maybe they just keep doing what they're doing and making different avenues for the people that find the thing that they like, whether it's Jack as a 10 or 11-year-old who gravitates to Clone Wars and Bad Batch and animation, whether it's, one of us that goes, I'm watching these shows, but I'm really waiting for the movie to come out. Or it's, a younger generation person who was grown up on, serialized streaming TV and go, all I want is more shows. Give me more shows. The movies are kind of, it is what it is. It may not be that it needs to be super adjusted. It may be that my expectations need to be adjusted a little bit and go, I get to consume it the way I want to. My 70-year-old dad gets to consume it the way he wants to. And my 14-year-old daughter gets to take it a different way. Like, we do spend a lot of time because we're content creators, trying to parse that out. But these are some pretty smart folks too that seem to, for the most part, know what they're doing. So maybe I'm the dumb that doesn't know what's going on. I
think not knowing what people are not understanding what characters want is kind of at the heart of the Mandalorian this season.
Mm.
Like, you know, you mentioned Pete with we thought the quest was going to go on for the whole season. It didn't. And Den's just kind of been happy to like raise Grogu after that, which is great. It's kind of like the season is an extended beach episode. I'm enjoying it. Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
But you also have people coping with, like, you know, get a little bit of Grogu coping with his trauma. It's a little bit more like, usually it's a single episode of a series where, like, maybe in Game of Thrones, there'd be an episode where everybody just kind of gets their crap together and like you move pieces around on the chessboard to like set up the next big thing. Based on what I've heard about episode 7, it kind of seems like that's what they've been doing a lot this season. I think by the end of episode 8, we're all going to be like, oh yeah, tight, got it,
Right.
awesome.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. And I, you know, one of the things I said in a video that I put together real quickly was that I think one of the challenges is, the Mandalorian ended at the end of, perhaps at the end of the Book of Boba Fett, the Mandalorian as we know it, as we look at it as a show, right? And it's not that, it's the Mandalorian Part 2, but people are still waiting, you know. And I think I always think about because Mandalorian came out right before Last Jedi, and I remember Rise of Skywalker came out right before Rise of Skywalker. And I remember going with my sister-in-law, who is just, you know, she only came to the Star Wars movies with us because, you know, Uncle Pete was taking her son to go see it. And so we walked out and she said, I thought there was a baby Yoda in this movie. And so it's like, there's maybe that story is over, and maybe it's difficult to shift those gears. And I also always ask myself, are we only seeing it this way because we spend so much time in this nerd culture? Is the bolus of the population, are most people in that top of the bell curve just like, all right, cool, that was fun, because, you know, Ryan, one day I'm gonna have to have you on and we're gonna have to talk about Rise of Skywalker, because I think you and I are in a very similar boat on that. And but people love that movie. People, normies, I have friends who are just like, that was the best one, the Emperor was in it, it was great. And that's, you know, there's
you know what, I've never actually heard that opinion before, because I'm so deep in the culture. Yeah, I mean, my wife didn't like it, but and she's somewhere in between us and the norms. But yeah, we've got, okay, I'm just going to tease something. We've got a podcast video coming up tomorrow on the channel that has about 45 seconds of Rise of Skywalker montage that is so funny. It's like, I immediately, when I saw it in our file app, I was like, everybody watch this. Like, the editor did a great job with it. I hate them. I hate it so much. But I hate it. You know what's weird though? At one point, people hated the prequels. Now they're cheering Ahmad Best. And Star Wars kind of has this thing where we always come back to it and go, I'm nostalgic for when I hated that so much. You know, like it always gets us. Like, we always say, remember how worked up I got over Attack of the Clones? That was silly. Let's watch the droid fight. You know, like,
right.
Yeah.
I'll get there eventually with that piece of junk.
I wonder if one of the things that'll help with casuals and, you know, or normies would be, and I'm not even sure they're doing it now, but when you have a new series coming out, like with Ahsoka, like if they could do some kind of a playlist, not so much a recap, but like a playlist, since they have every episode of everything out
Disney
there,
Plus has one up already. Essential Ahsoka episodes. Yeah.
There you
go.
Yep.
But if, you know, someone doesn't want to take the time to watch it, and that's fine. I mean, jump in wherever you want. You know, I always say that about when people, you know, what should I watch to get into Stars? I'm like, grab something and start reading or start watching. I don't care. Just get in. But I would hope that they do some kind of extensive recap, because like that one for Obi-Wan, like, as much as we all know that story, the way it was edited and the way it was brought about, like, it gave me like new feelings about.
So good.
But
same. I mean,
and it gave me
we were at
new feelings about it.
Yeah, we were at Celebration last year in Anaheim, and we got to go to that screening that they did, and I was enraptured those first 2 minutes while they did that recap, and I had seen all of that. Like, it wasn't new, but I was hooked like I had never seen it before, because it also did connect back to, you know, those original feelings when I saw it.
I think if they had gone back and refilmed a few key elements of Clone Wars, maybe with Ashley Eckstein as young Ahsoka, just exactly like that Boba Fett montage. It would have done everyone so much good, and
Hmm.
maybe also including, like you said, a Book of Boba Fett recap with Den and Grogu. But I just think that they're excited. I think Favreau and Filoni have this story, and they know where it's going, and they want to get there. And
Right.
along the way, they're kind of taking it for granted that everybody's going to follow them. Maybe because when they go to things like Celebration, they hear our voices. But I do think that some people are getting left behind. If they can enjoy, like the last episode, I really liked it. I'm surprised so many people
Yeah.
didn't, because it was a straight up, you can enjoy this no matter what, with a sprinkling
Boom.
of world
Mhm.
building. All you need.
So the last episode of Book of Boba Fett, and I might have told you this, Ryan, when you were on the show with me. I walked out of that one very similar to the Last Jedi, in that here's what's going to happen. The Pikes are going to come. They're going to do this. They're going to do that.
Mhm.
None of it happened. So I ended Book of Boba Fett like, well, I didn't love that episode. I watched it that night with my son. When it was over, he was like, that was the best episode yet. And I was like, okay, cool, because he got it. And it was we watched the episode. I will admit, when the episode ended this past week of Mandalorian, I texted Nick and I was like, that's my least favorite so far. Now I watched it just the other night with my son, and he was like, is that Lizzo? Is that Jack Black? The episode ended. He loved it. And I was like, you know what? They're doing it right. Again, I think it's this group of people that we all spend so much time with. We just can't help but over nerd about it, perhaps, and forget that these are the people who or the audience is much bigger than us. And I think that's the lesson I try to remind myself of so many times, is the audience is bigger than what I'm.
And for as much as I use the term normies when I talk about people who are casual fans, the reality is, and we've said this before, we're the freaks. I'm the weirdo that spends too much time thinking about it, talking about it, podcasting about it. Like, I'm the one with a problem. It's not, you know, the casual fan and the 160 million other Disney Plus subscribers who may or may not watch it.
Yeah. So, Ryan,
you were... isn't it nice to have people like us? And it used to just be all sports shows.
This is true. Brian, I have to say, seeing Doug on your lap, I'm like, when's Doug going to talk? I firmly believe. I believe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was like,
yeah. Here's a true story. Last year, my wife and I took a trip to Italy. Right. It was basically because the pandemic, happened, and I was doing this job. I didn't have any. I just worked because you couldn't take vacations. And then we planned this trip to Italy, trip of a lifetime, saw the David, cried, but getting to go meant like spending a lot of the year putting up people in place, guest hosts, and all these systems that weren't structured. And one of the guest writers said, "Oh, can I put Doug in it?" And I was like, "Yeah, Doug can do it." Like, it didn't even occur to me. Wait. Oh, so yeah.
I guess
I did take the recorder with me, so Doug still was in it, but I was like, yeah, it's not a problem. Just go.
Ryan, you were saying before we hopped on that you had some.
Wait, I heard my name. What's everybody saying? Wait, just a second. Hold on. Is this? Wait.
There's Doug.
How does this work? Just a second. Okay. All right. You guys are nerds.
Oh man, that's it's ridiculous and it's funny. This coming from a guy who does the voice of this battle droid on the show every now and then, so it's so you were saying before we got on that you have some theories. Did we hit on them? Did you want to share some of your thinking
theories?
I think we were talking
about
a little
Mando?
bit, maybe it was Mando, or maybe it was just sort of where Star Wars is going. I don't know. Maybe I misheard you.
I spoiled myself when I read the synopsis of episode 7 of Mando that came out of Celebrate. I normally don't do that kind of thing, but I thought it would help me with the video. So I can't talk about theories.
So
I have a grander theory.
Okay, yeah, let's do
for everything else after. Yeah. Apart from the obvious of like they're cloning Palpatine and all that stuff. I think what's going to happen is the movie's going to be about the New Republic, or lack thereof, on the Jedi Order, your Star Wars Avengers fighting the Chiss Ascendancy.
I can go with that.
The Chiss Ascendancy are one of those great untapped resources of Star Wars storytelling. I think they're going to come out of the unknown region, fight the New Republic.
Oh, no,
yeah,
let's
exactly.
That,
and they're going to beat them. The New Republic will beat them or whatever. For some reason, the New Republic won't remilitarize after that, but that power vacuum in the unknown regions is going to lead to the Palpatine's fleet and the rise of the First Order and things like that.
Yeah.
I think the
Broad
biggest
strokes.
I love that. I think the biggest challenge is it's sort of like we had Paul Sung Young Lee on yesterday. We were talking about his episode with Elia Kane, Katie O'Brien, and how we were all watching it and we just knew we were watching. We're like, this is why it happened. These are the mistakes you all made. And so I think that part of the challenge is how do you create a movie that takes place before you know what it's the eternal challenge, and Star Wars has never really had a problem going into any of those spots. I mean, they did the prequels, right? We knew that little kid was going to turn to Vader, and we still enjoyed those movies. As to your point, Ryan, a bunch of years later. But it's a challenging place to write a story and not make it just sort of the setup for what's coming.
Well, it's all about your characters. Like, this is the brilliant thing. We had Heather Antos on the show the other day, and she did this great job talking about with the Star Wars comics. They knew where the characters ended up, but that was a strength because they got to show us. Like right now, they're doing these great stories showing like Vader slowly slipping back to the good side even before Return of the Jedi. So we know where events end up. We do not know what happens to Den or Grogu or even Bo-Katan. Like if they do a good job getting us invested in the people, then sky's the limit with the storytelling. Who cares if we know how the galaxy? I can tell you how every movie ends. The good guys win. You know.
That's true.
Spoilers.
It's like Stanley when they used to ask him who wins between this character and that character. The one that I want to. That's the way that works, right? Yeah.
And that's exactly it. And we've talked about that. And of course, I made my big ridiculous, theory board. I didn't bring it up this time, but in this new era that we're in, not only with the Mandoverse, this 5 years post Return of the Jedi timeline, but with Bad Batch and all that stuff, it is showing us exactly like you said, Ryan. We know where, what happens in Force Awakens. We know that the capital is on Hosnian Prime, not on Coruscant anymore. And so when they blow up the capital, we know that, the New Republic is gone. Now it's, the Resistance and the First Order. Like, we know things have shifted, but there's a 30-year time period where we have to go, but how did that happen? And we get, the tease of it in Bloodline. We get the tease of it in, some of these other things. And so to get it in, these shows, and like in the episode, the Dr. Pershing episode, when they're talking about equipment and they're like, equipment doesn't have morals. It's just, equipment. And they're like, we just slapped a different name on it. Like it's the same thing. Listening to the rich people in the lobby of the Opera House. Oh, can you imagine me being sent off to war? Like, it's very realistic to go, oh, this is how they ended up where they did, because it's just the same thing with other incompetent people who can't run the thing. And it makes me love
that episode.
Yeah, and it makes me think about how tired Leia must have been to have literally spent her entire life one rebellion after another, and so to me, the brilliance in it is seeing how they're filling in those gaps and showing us this is how we got there, because that's what we don't know other than a handful of books, a smattering of comics, that kind of stuff. It's setting up that bigger picture of somehow Palpatine returned. Yeah, because we get Mount Tantus in the Bad Batch, and we get the teaser for season 3 where he says this project has to be protected at all costs. Like, we're seeing what that looks like and how those little bits fill in along the way. And to me, that's the brilliance of the storytelling. And as I say all the time, it's like a puzzle. Everybody's complaining because they've only put half the puzzle together. Well, let's wait till the puzzle's done before we decide if it looks cool or not.
And what's really interesting is for a long time, I kind of had a grudge against a little bit of Force Awakens, a little bit of The Last Jedi, because Force Awakens is the first Star Wars movie to end on such a direct cliffhanger. You had to pick up in the next second. Therefore, you couldn't have like a span of years between the movies. So they were squandering lots of story potential from other creators. We do have like a 1-year gap between episodes 8 and 9, though. And now, kind of inadvertently, they've created a wealth of potential stories by creators just to explain the decisions they made, because there wasn't a plan in place for the trilogy. Yeah. So in a roundabout way, they did create a pretty fertile ground for people like Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and everybody else.
Right. We're gonna leave you this gap from here to here. Go fill
Right.
it in. Make some cool
Yeah.
stuff happen. Um, we mentioned Bad Batch. I want to throw there for one quick second. I know you watch all the episodes and you talk about it. It seems like you're a Bad Batch fan.
Hmm.
What are your what we heard from about Bad Batch? I feel like this upcoming season, there's not going to be any one-off weekly missions. What do you expect that we'll see in season 3 of Bad Batch? How far into it do you think it's going to go, and how do you think it's going to end?
It'd be cool if there was a time jump, wouldn't it? In there, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea. I can't even begin to make a prediction on it because we could see the next thing resolved right away. It kind of feels like, though, because now they've introduced a home for them, that something's going to have to keep driving them away from that home, would be my
Yeah.
guess. I enjoyed a lot of the one-off episodes. I think there was only one
Yeah.
episode I didn't care for in the whole season. Like Faster was great, terrific episode. But it's
Mhm.
because they used those one-off episodes to build character. Tech was
Right.
criminally neglected in the first season. And of course, it's like the Dumbledore thing. As soon as you get to know character a little bit better, they're on their way out. Spoilers, I guess. But I'm excited. I do think we could see this thing where they are on the Empire's radar. They're relentlessly pursued, and then they can't help but be like drawn to this clone galactic conflict. I also think we're probably going to see a massive clone rebellion that explains why there's not a
Yeah.
lot of people who look like Tamura Morrison running around in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
That's just a guess, but
Mhm.
I guess that's also my wish list. I'd love to see all that.
Yeah.
Cal Kestis pop in. Why not?
That would be great. And I want to see it was seeing Cal on the stage, not Cal, obviously that's not his real name, but Monahan on the stage with for Jedi Survivor. It makes me want to see him more in something. Let's see him live. Chris, you had a question. I wanted to give you the chance before we let Ryan bust out of here.
For since the end of Rise of Skywalker, I've been like, metaphorically banging my head up against the wall going, what is going to happen to the galaxy now as far as governance goes? And I didn't think of it like Ryan, you had an idea about it. And I thought it was brilliant. And I was like, yeah, please do that. Instead of another overarching government, was different sectors, different sections of space have their own governments, like all over the place. I love that. And what kind of went into that?
No government.
Like, what would you think would come out of that as far as storytelling goes?
Well, if you think about it, the New Republic was kind of an artificial creation, right? So the way the Republic evolved back in the day was the Jedi, and I could be wrong about my timeline here because who can remember the different canons? The Jedi existed, the Republic came into being, and then the Jedi basically helped facilitate relationships between planets because they're born diplomats, So the Republic, like the glue that held it together was the Jedi Order. Palpatine obviously had to replace the Jedi Order with a standing military, which the Republic didn't have. I'm not caught up on High Republic, so I don't know if they institute a standing military to fight the Nihil, so I'm not sure.
There's some kind of a defense force, but they're really ineffectual.
Yeah, but it's like local planetary forces that will come in, kind of like what we saw in Phantom Menace and the prequels, right? Like, okay, so the Palpatine replaced them with that. Where the New Republic came along, Mon Mothma made this decision: we're going to demilitarize 90% before there was a Jedi Order ready. I've talked about this on Screen Crush, so sorry if you're listening. You've heard me say the same thing before. Now you look at it, and we're in this really interesting position where there is no bad guys. The good guys' planet was blown up. All the experienced politicians. I think a lot of wealthier worlds, and let's face it, governments are run by wealth. They wouldn't necessarily see the benefit in a united government. They would see the benefit in private trade federations, that kind of thing. They would be in it for themselves. I think you would see sectors held by corporations. You would see massive amounts of space just taken over by pirates because they have been ignored. The New Republic did a really bad job policing them, as we've seen in The Mandalorian. So if you want to say, I'm a storyteller, what's the most compelling story for a new Jedi Order? It is, oh my God, the galaxy is a shambles. Like, we have these two planets or these two sectors. Like, imagine the Romulans and the Klingons, and then you send a Jedi in to try to put them at peace together. You take that, or like, we have to stop these. Like, you have this galaxy that should be in total chaos. where
Right.
nobody wants an overarching government. Nobody trusts the government. Basically, the United States, after the War for Independence, when we were what were they called? It was the Articles of Confederation. I forget what they actually called them, but it wasn't the United States. Where like it's all these loose people who kind of agree to hang out and do things together, but really not. Like that to me. And then you add in Rey, this character who like is going to define her own story for the first time, who is for the first time the author of her own story. So excited what they can do for that.
Yeah.
I hope Palpatine comes back.
Yeah.
I should have had that clip ready that you use all the time. Somehow, Palpatine.
I think
Okay.
a follow to that would be because all right, so as a kid and up until the prequels, I love the Jedi. I am not a fan of the Jedi thanks to the prequels, and that's not bad writing. It's what the Jedi were at that point.
Right.
And their teachings and everything. Like if I were a Force user, I wouldn't want to. Like I'm not a religious person. I like in IRL, I'm not a religious person. I don't. It's too much structure for me. For Rey, I wonder if she's gonna stick to the as Palpatine put it. And listen, I'm sitting in the theater in Revenge of the Sith. First time, I was like, oh yeah, he's making a whole lot of sense. Like talking about the narrow-minded, dogmatic view of the Jedi. I'm like, yeah.
We're gonna have to clip that one out, Pete. We're gonna have to use that.
I lean dark side anyway. So I mean, give me a red saber and a black cape, and I'm like, you got me. But what would I'm trying to think of what would her Jedi Order be like, and would they be that constricting? As
I would
as
assume
a,
not
as the, as a religion.
because I would assume not because she hasn't grown up with that. She's grown up as a person who is in dire need of connection, who sought connection from her parents for her entire life. But the exciting thing there is then she can find out why that's a problem. And the High Republic has been so good for fleshing this out, for showing that like Jedi can have sexual relationships, but it's the attachment between a sexual relationship that clouds your connection to the Force and makes you want to use the Force for your own means and not for the means of others, which is where people use the dark side. So maybe she'll have a moment where maybe she and Finn finally do the thing. I don't know, but maybe she'll have an attachment to somebody, and then that Force lightning comes back or whatever connection to it. Maybe that'll make her afraid of that, and she'll have to arrive at that conclusion herself. And maybe that brings it full circle. So then we look back and go, yes, we understand the no attachment rule.
Yeah.
As long as it's
That's
rooted in character, I think they could sell you.
Yeah,
For sure. Well, and I think we even get, the little planting of seeds along the way with, as much as everybody laughed about it, but with Broom Boy, with Finn, with, these people who have the ability to use the Force, but you don't have to be a part of a dogmatic religious order. You're a Force user. A Jedi was a religion like a Christian is, but you can be a person of faith or have a connection to God without being specifically in, Southern Baptist or, whatever your thing is. And so I think there's also the possibility of heading into that, more generalized, and Luke, they set it up again. Part of the reason I love The Last Jedi so much is Luke said it himself, the hubris of the Jedi. It's time for the Jedi to end. It's time for this structural thing that failed to end, but that doesn't mean that there aren't Force users, and that doesn't mean that there's not a connection to this thing that binds the galaxy together, but it has to chart a new path. It has to become something that's different, and it's different generationally. We've all seen that, the evolution from our grandparents to us to our kids, like things change. And I think that they have a really beautiful opportunity to set something like that up in the way the Force works and the way whatever the new Jedi are.
Right.
So I say let's go with it.
The Martin Luther of Jedi, one of the Protestant Jedi. One of the...
nail those theses to the temple door with a lightsaber.
Oh man. Well, Ryan, thank you so much. We've taken up a good deal of your time tonight, and I appreciate you joining
It's an
us.
honor. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
We didn't talk a ton about Celebration, but you know what? I think it's so we know that Celebration was setting us up for all this stuff, so I think it works great. For the few people, Ryan, that aren't waiting eagerly for every one of your videos as soon as the show that I just watched finishes, tell people where they can find you and keep up with you on the interwebs.
Oh, you're too kind. YouTube channel is Screen Crush. Post at least one video every day and as many Mandalorian videos as we can get out to you. Theory videos, talkback videos, Easter egg videos, and then after the Mandalorian, we're going to be very low and sad till Guardians of the Galaxy starts up. And you can also find me at Ryan Airy on Twitter.
Awesome. Very good. And if you're watching Mandalorian and you see an Easter egg, make sure to tag Ryan with it because he's going to need it for his videos. He'll call you out. He's done it before. And in fact, I think that's Chris. That's how you found it. Chris sent me a link. Yeah, Chris sent me a link. Goes, this guy just called you out. I was like, oh, yeah, no, it's Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah. This is relatively, this is so I'm like, Ryan, I'm a new fan of Screen Crush. Like we're talking maybe in the past month, you know. He called it out, and I was like, "Oh, this show is awesome. Why have I not been watching this?" And then, faithful.
Yeah, if somebody notices something that I have not noticed myself, I'm not going to claim I found it. I'm not a thief. I'll shout people out.
Oh, we love it. It's great, and we're all big fans here. And thank you again for spending some time with us. And looking forward to catching Mandalorian and keeping up with you, everybody. We are going to be back to our regular show on Fridays. I think our wives and families are happy that Star Wars Celebration is over. They kind of feel like we were actually there because we spent so much time preparing for our shows over the last couple nights. So we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming on Thursday on Around the Galaxy. We're going to put the Paul interview that happened last night. Paul surprised us and joined us for an hour last night and gave us some really cool insights, some great stories. But I think that's going to wrap it up for us tonight. Nick, may the force be with you.
Always.
Just one more round, friend, then homeward bound, friend. Don't forget me in your dreams. Just one more song, friend, and then so long, friend. The nights get shorter, it seems. Just one more rhyme, friend. Yes, it's a crime, friend. But you know time, friend. Time can fly. So it's good night, friend. Good night, but not goodbye.